Two projects were hotly debated during this week's planning board meeting. We have details on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Tuesday, May 12th, 2015. I'm Sarah Mantle. Less than a week after Governor Charlie Baker addressed Cape residents about the need for affordable housing, a local Hyannis resident is fighting a plan to add 2 apartments on South Street. The applicant hopes to build a third building on their property. The building would contain a 2-car garage, a 1-bedroom apartment on the first floor, and a 3-bedroom apartment on the second floor. Attorney John Kenny, who represents the property's owner, requested the planning board approve a special permit to allow the project to move forward.
Mr. Ethier is here with me, seated right there, and with him is his father, Mr. Ken Ethier. If this project is allowed to move forward, Mr. Ken Ethier and his wife would live on in the first floor apartment unit, and Jason would live above his parents on the second floor. We're requesting a special permit. This property is the subject of 2 prior special permits granted back in the 1950s that had some conditions that either need specific modification, or by your decision you can modify it by granting a new special permit. And this is a special permit, not a variance. I know it's a little bit kind of different for this board, but the zoning ordinance designates the planning board as a special, or the permit granting authority for the growth incentive zone in the SF single family residential district. So as I go through the criteria, I just ask you to pay close attention to the criteria, because it is much different burden upon the applicant than a variance. It's essentially that we do not derogate from the intent of the zoning ordinance, and it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, but I'll go through that criteria as we go through, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Charles Sabat represents an abutter to the project. He argued that the planning board does not have the authority to issue the special permit.
And I wanted to address 3 major areas if I could. First of all, the legal basis upon which they appear here tonight. Secondly, the merits of what they're presenting to you. And thirdly, if you are inclined to grant relief, I have some suggested conditions and some that I think reflect the concerns of my client. First of all, let me talk to you about the legal basis upon which they appear here tonight. In the single-family district, there is no ability to obtain a special permit for anything. It's restricted to single-family use only, and the renting of rooms to lodgers, and there's one other use that's permitted. So in order to get before you, to get a special permit in this Hyannis district, they need to find a way to do that. And the way that they have found is to argue that the existence of the 2 prior special permits makes this a pre-existing non-conforming use, number 1. And number 2, they ask you in the alternative to modify these pre-existing special permits that were granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I would suggest to you that you have no basis upon which you can do either of those things. And there seems to be an assumption that this is a pre-existing non-conforming use by virtue of the fact that it is allowed, that these apartments, the 6 existing apartments, are allowed by special permit. A pre-existing non-conforming use is one that exists as a matter of right, not one that exists as the result of permission having been granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that if in 1955 the Residence B district had allowed apartment buildings in this area, this would in fact be a pre-existing lawful non-conforming use, because it would have been allowed as a matter of right.
Following a lengthy discussion, the planning board voted to continue the public hearing until the board's next meeting. In the interim, the growth management staff will consult with the town's attorney on the legal issues presented, as well as work with the abutter to try to establish agreeable conditions. The next planning board meeting will be held June 8th at 7 in the town hall hearing room. A project to improve the Marston's Mills Village Center moves forward despite some opposition to the removal of several trees on Route 149. During this week's planning board meeting, town engineer Roger Parsons talked about the project and the need to remove some trees.
I was going to begin the introduction to the tree hearing, or the scenic road hearing, by calling out that the purpose for which we're before you tonight, the reason we're asking to clear some trees, is for a project that is a safety improvement, we feel, benefit for pedestrian movement in the village, and hopefully aesthetically and functionally as well. So what we're talking about, is we don't often, in many cases, is not a conventional roadway paving project, shall we say, of which many, as you know, have been before you in the past. So to keep that as a backdrop, and then to try to add to the status of the project, so moving to that dimension, we now have a design of the project that has been discussed and received feedback from members of the Village Association and others, interested parties in general, for this section of roadway in the center village area of Marston's Mills on Route 149, from Mill Pond to Lovell's Lane, basically the total extent of the project. And we are at approximately a 75% design mode. We are making final adjustments to that design in regard to certain areas of businesses, whereby we are actually going to be seeking easements for some of the activities that we would like to construct. And we are at that point. This being the last hurdle from a permitting standpoint that we are seeking. We have received an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission.
After much discussion amongst planning board members, only 3 voted in favor of the project, while 3 abstained from the vote. That meant the measure failed to obtain the necessary 4 votes to pass. Planning board member Patrick Princey then made a motion to reconsider.
Based on the fact that, as the earlier speaker said, you know, this has been long overdue. Anything to the benefit of the Marston's Mills Village has just been long overdue. I feel like my whole life living in Barnstable, like all the other villages have gotten attention, but Marston's Mills gets left out. And you know, they brought us a great plan here, and they've done an enormous amount of work with the Civic Association. And for us to kick it down the road so we can go look at a few trees that we've all seen on our slides on a road that we've driven down thousands of times, I just think delays this project further, and the residents of Marston's Mills Village deserve better.
Local business owner Alex Dumal was quick to address the board after the vote to reconsider was approved.
It's probably the ugliest business. It's right there, that one right there. We've owned it for 6 years, and we've had no incentive to really do anything with it, just because it's just not a great road. So we've considered selling it and moving to someplace that's more business friendly. We think this is great. This is exactly what the town needs, you know, the village needs. Roger, Joanne, everybody's done a great job informing us, working on all kinds of stuff. We're currently right now planning on staying and gonna make a much nicer building, mainly because this plan is going forward. I'd hate to see it delayed even further because of 1 or 2 trees. We've got, we have actually 5 huge stumps in our yard because it was a Verizon or the power company, somebody, without any permission, took down all kinds of trees. Yeah. And they didn't need any approval at all. And a couple other things while I'm up here. The on-street parking is critical to this. And if you had attended any of the meetings at all, the other open hearings, I think that's the #1 concern that the village had. So it's very important that that's there to really help the businesses have places to park. So I think it's great. I'd hate to see you not move forward with this and delay the project even further.
Finally, the motion passed on the second vote with 5 members in favor and 1 abstaining. Tonight, the Conservation Commission meets at 6:30 in the Town Hall hearing room. We'll be sure to tune in to our hour-long news program, Barnstable This Morning, weekdays at 7 a.m. On tomorrow's show, we will get the latest real estate numbers from Register of Deed Jack Mead. We'll talk with Finance Director Mark Milne, plus we'll have all the news and information you need. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mantle.